Hello there, friends of AI4Autism. It's Shaheen here, and we continue with our series of interviews where we hear from members of our community and listen to their stories. And today we have a lovely guest with us. Ruth is an autistic mum hailing from Essex here in the UK, and Ruth is also the mother of one autistic daughter, Evie. And today we'll be hearing Ruth's story and we'll get a chance to learn from her experiences. So please welcome Ruth Sharman. Hey Ruth, how's it going?
Hello, it's going well. What an introduction. Yes, hopefully I'll live up to it.
I'm sure it's going, and I'm sure the interview is going to be awesome as well. Ruth, let's fire off with the first question. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself and how old you were when you were diagnosed as autistic?
Well, I am 45 and I actually am not technically diagnosed autistic. I am self-diagnosed autistic. There was a reason behind that, which I will go into, but basically my background is that I have been teaching in early years and special educational needs for, oh gosh, 2 decades. I had been. I'm now retired from that. And many of my pupils are autistic, and I got on very well with those pupils and really enjoyed that work. And it was really during the course of that work, I had a lot of autism training, as it were, and there would be points where I go, that sounds like I was like that as a kid. You know, I understand this, but I can't be autistic because they say that we don't have any empathy and we don't this and we don't that. And also I'm a woman, so it's less likely that I'm autistic. So I just sort of put it to one side. It wasn't until my daughter was 4, which is 6 years ago, and she started school, that there were a lot of question marks as to how she was coping in school. Um, and I thought, I think she might be autistic, and started delving into a lot of online assessments and a lot of articles regarding autism, and thought, oh, and so am I. So it was the same journey that a lot of parents take. Their child is suspected autistic, is diagnosed autistic, and then they're like, I think that I'm autistic. And then either seek diagnosis or not. And the reason I'm not diagnosed as yet is because the waiting lists are not months, but years.
Wow.
And uh, there are a few issues in terms of if you go for a self-referral. So if you go to your GP and say, I would like to be diagnosed autistic, please, or I'd like to go for the assessment, please, they'll often say no, because you're perfectly fine in your world, you know, you're holding down a job, you're doing this, what do you need that for? So often you'll get blocked. There can be, oh, there's going to be a knock at the door. Hold on. Graham's the postman. It's all right, you can edit this one out. It's typical, isn't it?
No, we'll keep it in. It's
Yeah, I'll
really
keep it
fun.
in. I'll keep
Yeah.
it in. It's authentic. Here's a postie. So you got anything for me? Of course he has. I order so much stuff.
To Ruth, yeah.
Yeah, right. I don't want it now. Go on.
No, that's fine.
All right.
You have a cat instead.
I don't want the cat either. So
She does.
I think that's an unexpected
What's my
introduction for Graham
yeah.
too.
Yes, this is my husband. He's he's good at interrupting. I struggle with interruptions. This is one of my issues. Train of thought. If I'm in the middle of flow, I mean, everybody has this. There's something called tendril theory, which is to do with this and to do linked with being autistic. But I'll try and get back to where I was. I was saying about, yeah, so parents often sort of realise that they're autistic because they're children. Diagnosis, particularly for women, is a whole lost generation of particularly women who managed to scrape their way through school and through social interactions, but did not get diagnosed because it wasn't a thing back then. You couldn't be autistic if you were a girl. And of course, we know that's nonsense now. but there is a stigma attached to getting an autism diagnosis even now, and the fact that it's difficult to get one, the fact that it's very expensive to then go privately. We're talking hundreds, if not thousands, depending on where you go. And also that diagnosis may not be seen valid by certain sort of local authority, etc. So it's kind of like, do I need it or do I know? And at the moment, I'm in a position where I know that I'm autistic. Do I need extra support in a formal way? Not at this time. So I've decided not to pursue it for now. But I do expect, and especially if it gets easier to access in the future, then I will be pursuing it. So yeah. So I've been aware since just before I turned 40. And it's been an interesting time since. Yes.
Well, thank you for sharing that. It's absolutely fascinating what you said. And it's not the first time that I've heard when someone had a child and looking at them, it was like both a torch and a mirror held up towards them, and they were able to see certain characteristics in themselves that they can see in their children. And suddenly the light goes off. Hang on, I just realized I could be autistic, and it all makes sense now. Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's been a revelation. But it's ironic that for 20 years, I was working with autistic people, and I think that I'm not going to, being arrogant here, I was good at my job. I couldn't keep that up because it was exhausting, but I was good at my job, and I think it's because I was also autistic, so therefore I was talking to my people, my tribe, my group, as it were, and it just makes communication a whole lot easier between autistics. So yeah, it was one of those things where, looking back, a lot of things that happened in my life made sense, and prior to that you think, there's always a point, or you think, what is wrong with me? Why can't I do this? Why is everyone else doing that and I can't do it? When you're younger and less less secure in who you are. Whereas now I don't care whether I can do things the same as everybody else. I don't want to. I want to be me. So I don't care now. And thankfully for my daughter, who has her diagnosis, she got that eventually. It took 5 years.
Wow.
Well, it took 5 years from us realizing to then eventually getting her in the system and getting her a referral. And then it was about 18 months, 2 years to get the full assessment done. So it's a long time, but it was quicker than a lot of my my peers. But she's got her diagnosis. She's aware of who she is, what autism means, what her autism means, and is owning it at a much younger age. So she's got all the benefits and supports that myself and a lot of women and men like me haven't had, and that will make a huge difference for her. She's going to be her authentic self. So I'm pleased.
And what you said right now about her autism is really key. I think sometimes there is also that stereotype that everyone within the autistic community is exactly the same. And as you're aware, it's diverse. It's diverse. Everyone has different characteristics and express their autism in different ways. Yeah, amazing. And this next question. So after having that realization that you were autistic, and what that meant, how did you feel and how did you change as a person?
I didn't worry so much anymore. Well, actually, that's a lie, because I worry a lot. I'm a worrier, not a warrior, a worrier. I do worry a lot, but I became more self-aware of the worrying and what was making me worry and why I get anxious, because a lot of it is to do with my sensory needs and the myriad other things that is basically because I'm autistic, and I have learned to accept the things I find difficult and either adapt or even avoid those things, but at the same time, not everything, but if I feel, do you know what, I'd never like this, I don't want to do it, why should I have to do it? Society says that we should go and meet our friends. every week at work. Well, obviously not now because we're in a pandemic, but societal expectations don't fit everybody. They don't fit me. And I think also it was a little bit of turning 40, because you do start to give less of a worry about things. I was going to say a word that I'm not going to say, but you tend to worry less anyway about what other people think once you turn that age. So it was good timing in that respect. But I had a challenging time in my personal life at that time. It was difficult, and I won't go into that, but it was challenging, and discovering myself and my limits and my, how to word it, my boundaries, and putting those into place, it changed my life completely. I knew what I wanted, I knew what I was good at, I knew what I wasn't so good at. You sort of forgive yourself for the things that you might have been harder on yourself with before. Like, it's okay, you can't drive. My husband was like, I've got you this to learn to drive, and I can't drive, and I still can't drive. And I said to him, I'm really sorry, but I'm never going to learn to drive. I don't want to do it. I find it challenging, difficult, and I think even if I pass a test, I'm going to be a mess of worry. I don't want to do it. So I've decided I'm not going to, the end. And before, I always felt that I should be able to, and it's something that I should do. And that's just one thing, but that's I don't want to be in a situation where I'm pushing myself so hard to meet somebody else's expectations. So yeah, one of that.
Well, thank you for sharing that. It's amazing how sometimes expectations can really be like quite a burden, especially I'm assuming on an autistic person, when something that seems so natural and something that seems so simple for someone else, it might not necessarily be the case with someone from the autistic community.
Well, I mean, this is the thing. I mean, when it comes to social interaction, I'm quite good at masking. So, and I think women tend to be better at that, because there is that expectation that we are more friendly and sociable. We can give eye contact, and these are the interactions and how they work. And I was also very much working in a field for most of my life where there was a lot of social interaction. So I've developed that to the point where many would say, well, you can't be autistic because you've given me eye contact and you smile and you're friendly and you can make a joke and what have you. But they're all learned things, but they come naturally to me. Whereas some of my autistic peers really struggle with that now, and still do, because they've not had the experiences to build on and develop those further. I was going somewhere with that, but I've forgotten where I was going with it. But yeah, so I mask a lot, and other autistics maybe do not. But then other autistics can drive and are great at driving, they love it. And because I certainly display aspects of DCD, which is developmental coordination disorder, which was known as dyspraxia. My daughter is dyspraxic, and I also have another person coming to my door, about to knock. This is lockdown for you.
Yeah.
We order a lot of stuff online because we can't go shopping. My husband's clinically vulnerable, as am I. So he's extremely vulnerable. I'm just regular vulnerable. So is it a big box? Oh my goodness, it's a big box. But we're having to order all sorts of stuff online. A lot of it is to do with the garden, because I've discovered gardening in this lockdown. And in terms of, oh yes, it's the cold frames. It's such a calming activity. It really helps me out a lot. So I now have cold frames. Hooray!
Fantastic.
Yeah. Okay, dear. Yeah, husband's going to put those together.
Yeah. In fact, when it comes to husband, that's the next question I was going to ask you. After you discovering that you're autistic, how were friends and family towards you? And what was support from them if you needed support? And also, well, you touched on services earlier. What were services like, if there were any services needed?
No services for me, none for me. For my daughter, and she had extra support. So once she'd had her assessment, there was further assessment from occupational therapy because they realised that she was likely DCD, and she and I have both been diagnosed as having joint hypermobility syndrome, which is a connective tissue disorder and a comorbidity with autism. That's what I was saying before the postman came. This is also how my mind works. It dances around on stuff, which is a little bit more ADHD, but I'm not diagnosed with that either. So it's a crossover with autism. So if I hop around and those watching are sort of like, there is no train of thought. She's just smashed it. There is no train of thought, no. So she was diagnosed with DCD, and there's some physio and other exercises to support her to get better core strength, etc., and to build on coordination. Yes, but that was all the services she's really got, and then we were getting her education healthcare plan together, which is now done pretty much, and she starts secondary school in September. And we were very lucky in that it's usually a huge battle to get education healthcare plan, a huge battle to get the school we want. She's going to be attending a special school in September. I won't name it, but it's a school we wanted, and we can't wait. It's been very odd because we've not been able to visit the school, but we have had a lot of contact with them, and they are fabulous. So she's got everything she needs in place. I'm really pleased. In terms of me, well, I'm not expecting any services. I do get on with things myself. I'm quite lucky that my deficits are something that I can manage. My husband is very supportive because he's incredibly laid back, and he just goes, "Oh, all right, dear," to anything I say. My family have always been supportive of me no matter what I do or no matter what I say, really, because they're just awesome. They do roll their eyes a bit sometimes, certain members, because they're like, "Oh, she thinks everybody's autistic." They're sort of like, "Oh, just let her get on with it, whatever." But my parents particularly, when my daughter was diagnosed, and they said, "Well, she's autistic," I just went, "Yes," because the assessor really laughed. There were two assessors, and one of them laughed and the other was really nervous, because often parents will react quite negatively to the news that their child is autistic. Whereas I was like, vindication, we've been saying this for years, thank goodness you can see who she is. So the assessor that laughed knew I was going to react that way. But I came to my parents, who had actually brought us there, because I don't drive, funnily enough, still relying on my mum and dad. And I said to my dad, "Yes, she's autistic." And my dad was like, "Oh, well done." And my mum's like, "Why are you happy about that?" So my mum had a bit of education since then, because she's seen for who she is. And no, it's not a terrible thing. It's, knowing who you are. She's got the luxury of knowing who she is at age, which was 9. At me at age 9, I just thought I thought I was awesome, because I was. But I knew I was different. And it was often pointed out that I was different by my friends and not so friendly people, to the point where I thought, "Oh, well, I must be an alien then," and told my friends as much, that I was an alien, and they took no convincing whatsoever. Whereas, Evie can just say, "I'm autistic," and her friends just go, "All right then." They've had a lot of autism days at school. You know, they go, oh, let's talk about autism. But now Evie's like, well, that's not true. And will even say and self-advocate. They were saying, oh yeah, autistic people really love circles. I went, what? If one particular autistic child, their special interest was anything to do with spinning and circles. And Evie was like, well, I don't really care about circles particularly. That's just what they like. So she was able to educate on that level. So yes, in a rambling way, yes, I've had support. I remember when I first suspected that my daughter was autistic, my colleagues that I work with did not think that that was the case. And I did get the impression from certain people, they thought I was being an over anxious mother. But yeah, vindication.
It's truly wonderful to hear. And come September, I do wish Evie all the best in secondary school. It sounds, from what you've described, it sounds like such an encouraging and productive environment. I'm sure she's going to have an amazing time there, just thriving and blossoming.
Yeah, she's really struggled with school and learning, in that the school have done their absolute best, but they still have not quite met her needs, met her needs in the way that because she's quite an unusual child. She presents as a child that, you know, is really rather intelligent, and she is, but the way that school can get her the way she can access the curriculum is limited. Whereas at her new school, there's going to be a lot of adaptations for her, and in terms of in terms of being able to reach her potential, because she's got so much potential, this kid. I would say that I'm a mother, but I just feel that now her future is not set in stone. It's not limited. She could do anything, and she's going to achieve her best by attending this school and getting the support that she needs. So yeah, it's all the same as any parent. That's all they want for their kid, to be happy, to achieve. So yeah.
That's wonderful. In fact, one of the upcoming questions will be for you to tell us about your experience as a parent to an autistic child and what it's been like being mum to Evie. But the first thing I wanted to ask you was, you mentioned some of the deficits, and what were some of the challenging things that you faced as you were growing up, and even more recently?
I was weird, really weird, and I still am. I'm never going to stop being weird, but I accept my weird. I think I accepted my weird. Yeah, exactly. Weird is good. That's weird as well, doing that. But there you go. I quite liked being weird as a kid. I've always liked to, because I knew I was different. I embraced that difference. Like I say, telling my friends that I was an alien, and they were like, "Yeah, you probably are." That's down to Mork and Mindy. I absolutely loved that show. That was quite a big influence on me. And sci-fi in general, sci-fi and comedy were always a massive influence. And throughout my life, I've become very obsessional about certain things. I wanted to be a comedian at one point. As a child, I used to have these joke books, this long, tall, 1,000 jokes for kids, 1,000 more jokes for kids. Oh no, not another 1,000 more jokes for kids. And I would take them to school, and I would get kids in the corner, and I would tell jokes at them until they laughed, because if people find you funny, then they will like you, and that makes it easier to be liked. If they're laughing with you and not at you, helps. So I did a lot of things to counteract what were effectively bullying behaviour. And I struggled at secondary because I didn't fit in at all. And that's the time, I mean, your teenage years are the time where it's difficult anyway, because we're all sort of pre-programmed to want to fit in, and I didn't. And also I'm quite a large lady. I was a large child. I've never been anything but large. So you get pointed out because you're fat. Oh, she's clever. She is. She's too clever. Oh, you know, it's cooler to be thick. And oh, you don't wear your hair the right way or the right clothes, or you know. And I didn't do any of that. and I would try and think it's too much, and just I embrace the weirdness. And you know, I was bullied, but not to the extent to maybe other people went through, but it was damaging, and I think you take that with you. I certainly don't stand for it now. As I was quite immature, so when I left school age 6, well, I went into college and I went to university, but I didn't fit in there either really, but it didn't matter at university because no one did. We were all odd. But when I was in my 20s, it was like I was in my teens. Then when I was in my 30s, it was like I was in my 20s, because I was just felt like I was about a decade behind. So I'm now in my 40s, being in my 30s. Now I feel like my authentic self, and I'm sure when I hit 50, I shall then go, no, the life starts at 50, and then it continue on, you know. You find yourself, when I discovered I was autistic, that was okay, I'm not weird, I'm autistic. The weird is good, the weird is wonderful. Who wants to be the same as everyone else? Who wants to be average? Who wants to be normal? We don't use that word in this house. We don't use that word.
In fact, Ruth, I noticed
yeah.
right behind you, you have on the board, is anything around here normal? Normal is relative. I was looking over your shoulder there.
That's actually a quote from my own book, which is not published yet, but it tried to encourage me to finish the book. Yeah. There's a lot of geeky things behind me. This thing with lots and lots of little pictures. When I was a kid, I collected Garbage Pail Kid stickers, which were a big thing in the 80s, and I was obsessed with them. And I was so obsessed with them that my dad threw them out because he was concerned for my mental health, I think. And I never forgave him for that. I love my dad, but why did he do that? So I then collected them again through making loads and loads of bids on eBay until I got the full set, and I put them up on the wall. And I've got them now forever. They're mine. And then the other stuff is Discworld related, Terry Pratchett's books. Yep. So again, more geek. And on another wall, it's completely filled with Buster Keaton, who is my current special interest, which I have taken beyond special interest, and it's sort of become a job, really. So that's the benefits of special interests. So yeah, I think the main struggles I had as a kid was being weird, and there's certain expectations, certain milestones that I didn't make. I'm just gonna have a drink of water. Sure. I'm losing my voice. Yeah,
I think I'll join you for a quick swig.
Yeah, it's only water at this time of the morning. So that thing, I can't swim, I can't do anything involving wheels. I never did roller skating or any of those things. Ice skating, I spent the entire time on my bottom. It's just, I cannot coordinate at all. And that is surprisingly limiting. I'm deathly afraid of flying. I have flown, but it's not something that I choose to do. The pandemic's good, we can't go anywhere, so that's great. I don't have to do those things. It's not great at all, it's awful. But I try to see the positive side of it. I wish to some extent I could do some of those things, because being able to drive would be wonderful. It would be freeing, but I've come to accept that's not something that I'm going to do. And that's that, really. And I will work my way around it. But the knock-on effect, and I think I mentioned this to you before, because I don't drive, I don't have a driver's license. Because I don't travel, I don't have a passport that's in date. If I'm trying to get myself registered to any sort of service, whatever it might be, the ID they need is a driver's license and passport. And when I say I don't have these, it's like, well, what do you mean you don't have them? I don't have them. And people don't believe that it's possible, but it is. I'm that person. I'm that awkward, annoying person that doesn't have those things. So I experience the dread of, oh, this isn't going to be straightforward all the time. So yeah. That's just like a little fiddly first world problem, really, isn't it? But it's something that maybe the average person would not anticipate. So yeah.
Well, thanks for sharing that. It's fascinating, everything you said today. It's a matter of celebrating the strengths you have, celebrating the weirdness, and also understanding and appreciating your limitations. I mean, for example, like when it comes to driving, I guess the upside is you'll be chauffeured for the rest of your life, which is fantastic.
And it saves me a heck of a lot of money, really, in the short term. And I don't have to pay for car insurance. I don't have to pay out for a car. I'm saving the environment by using public transport. So I don't use that either at the moment. So yeah, it's let's say it's a lifestyle choice to save the planet. We'll dress it up as that. Yeah.
Why not? Why not? You mentioned earlier about, well, your experience to a degree of being a mum to Evie, and you've also shared some of her experience. And what has been like being a parent to Evie and seeing that, because you've already touched on celebrating her autism, being supportive, being encouraging. Would you like to tell us a little bit more about that? About what it's been like being a mum?
Yeah, it's brilliant. She's very, very funny. She's also really irritating as well, like a mother. It is a little bit like parenting myself.
Wow.
But she is thankfully different enough, so it's not reliving the same things. It's interesting because I have a very good relationship, a very close relationship to my mum. And so parenting Evie, as things have come up, mum will say, you did that. You did that. So for instance, it's things like, so Evie was a very easy child. She very rarely cried as a baby. She was an absolute delight to look after. She slept through from 5 weeks. She was awesome. And I had a great time with that. And it wasn't really until we realised that she was walking quite late. But my mum always used to joke that, well, you didn't walk until late either. First time it was like the not so great Little Britain with Andy, quite an ableist character, who wouldn't get out of his wheelchair unless his carer wasn't looking. And my mum used to joke that she thought I was walking around the place, but would stop and pretend I wasn't when they came back in the room. And I think the first time I walked, I actually ran through a new house screaming because I hated it. Age 2 and 2 and a bit. So that was the first time I walked, which was really late. And Evie had the same issue. I was less worried at that point because I knew that I walked late. She also didn't crawl, she bottom shuffled. And as I know now, that sort of development pathway is a little detrimental, but it's also indicative of neurodiversity. So when a baby crawls, they use this sort of cross body motion. And that motion is really important because everything that a child learns is all getting, the neural pathways in the brain, it's all being laid down. And those pathways help with writing, because when you're writing a letter S, for instance, although it might be the wrong way around, I'm not sure it works on here, but when you write a letter S, you're going cross body, it's a cross body motion. My daughter, she didn't crawl, she bottom shuffled. So later at school, when it came to writing and cross body motion, she really struggled. But she also struggled because of joint hypermobility and DCD. So a lot of the physical things, so the physical milestones that she struggled with. She spoke early and did not shut up like a mum. And she, in terms of her social interactions, on the surface, perfectly normal. However, there's a lot of lack of understanding of others and their needs and how they felt at the time. Now Evie has incredible empathy. In fact, it's overactive, and she gets very upset if anyone she cares about is upset and it takes on their emotions. She's almost like an empath in that she feels everything that other people are feeling around her. But she wasn't like that. She was more like, she came across almost in a way as selfish. She assumed that everyone else around her felt and thought the same as she did, and she had to sort of learn that that's not how it works. And she was able to access that really through story and film, and get quite complicated concepts through watching a movie about how someone, and she's particularly oh gosh, what's that one about all the feelings? There's a film, Disney one, I can't remember what it's called. I ought to, but anyway, it's all about emotions, and the emotions of the main character have, so there's joy and anger and what have you, and she really, you know the film I mean.
Is it the one inside the mind? There are different colors, different characters inside the person. I know the one, but I've forgotten the name.
Yeah, that's good, isn't it? Well, anyway, I'm sure people are, if they get to it, it's this film, for goodness sake, look it up. She really understood that. And it helped her a lot in terms of recognizing emotions, and she's also had a lot of support at school in terms of recognizing emotions and naming those and what have you. School have been fabulous. Her first school, it wasn't until quite late that they figured out maybe Evie could be autistic, after I've been saying I think she might be autistic. But she had juniors, and then she went to infants, and then she went to a junior school, and the junior school were a lot more on it. And that's how we've got everything in place for her, which has been invaluable. Couldn't have done that myself. But being her parent, there are things as she's got older that are challenging, because Evie is quite demand avoidant, and demand avoidance is a big feature of being autistic. That is basically, how can I describe it? It's not being, I don't want to do that because I just don't want to do it and I'm lazy. It's any sort of demand can feel overwhelming. So for instance, if I have a form to fill in, well, I don't particularly enjoy filling in forms, no one does, but it won't take that long. If I could just get it done, then I can get it out of the way and then I'll be all right. And that form never gets filled in, and that form doesn't turn into just a form that needs to be done. It's this horrible, enormous problem that makes me feel guilty and anxious and horrible. I just cannot do it. The demand has become too big. And for Evie, sometimes the simplest daily things can be a demand for her. So getting her up, getting her dressed, having her breakfast, cleaning her teeth, all of those basic things, I have to remind her, because she has also quite poor executive function, which is where, doing things in the right order and remembering to do certain things, which I also have, but I've had to work on that because I have to support a child who has issues with that. So I've become better in my executive function to support her in hers. And eventually she's developed some coping strategies of her own, which are really good. So in terms of remembering things, she will actually sit and write a note if it's something important. And she's figured the act of writing the note is enough to remind her. But if I did not remind her to do those things, they wouldn't happen. And so she relies on me an awful lot. So it's quite exhausting as a parent to be almost in like a PA role. But I know that as she continues to get older and she's becoming more independent. And so I won't have to do that forever, but my parents had to do it for me. So I know that she will develop those skills eventually, probably when she becomes a parent, and then it will be, here, Nan, have my child. Yeah, it's joyful, it's hilarious, it's a good time being a parent. It's also sometimes exhausting. We don't always agree. The same as any parent with their child. Part of me wishes that I'd had a second child, because she's an only child and she can get a little bit lonely, especially since she's not been at school for over a year due to the pandemic. And she will be going back hopefully in the summer. But other than that, it's all good. I won't send her back. I'll keep her, I think.
It's Wonderful. Thank you for what you shared right now. And it really does sound like your relationship with your mother, your experiences growing up, what you've learned about autism, and also your teaching experience and working with autistic children has really helped you just become an amazing parent to an autistic child. It was kind of all leading up to that, to a degree, would you say?
Maybe it was fate. It's just ironic. I just sit there and go, I've been working with these children for all these years,
Yeah.
and it's typical, isn't it? My child, she's autistic. Well, she would be, wouldn't she? Because her mother is. But it's there is a sort of fated thing. It all fits. It makes sense. It's a nice little neat package. Like, I did this because I was like this. This has happened and it's helped me. It has helped me become a better parent, but it doesn't mean it's very different teaching autistic children to being a parent of an autistic child, because at the end of the day, with your teaching, they go back to the parent. You've not got that child 24/7. Whereas, yeah, and there are difficult things in terms of, I mean, one of the things that, because Evie's sensory profile, I also have quite a strong sensory profile. She really cannot bear having her hair brushed, and it's a source of dread for her and myself doing that. We've had to develop a lot of strategies to cope with it, and it often leads to meltdowns, which are really hard on both of us, emotionally and physically. So, there are things that are a problem. I don't want to gloss over that, because it's a simple fact. It's a problem, and other parents may not ever experience that, and they've probably got other problems that they've got to deal with, but that is an issue for us that other people wouldn't even sort of know about, I guess.
Yeah. That's amazing. In fact, when it comes to the next question, I think you kind of touched on it to a degree. I was going to ask, what are some of the personality traits of Evie and that Evie possesses, and what are some of her interests? As we mentioned earlier, we spoke about how diverse the autistic community is and how everyone's different, one person to the next. What are some of the things about Evie that makes her really unique?
She's very funny. I think she's learnt that one. It's like, hey, they'll like you if you're funny. And she's very, very people oriented. She can become quite obsessive about people and friends. She cares deeply about her friends, and she wants to be a friend to everyone, and tries her damnedest to be the best that she can be in terms of a friend. She doesn't always get it right, and she learns very quickly from those mistakes, because other people are quite a motivator for her. Her sort of obsessive things at the moment, she was really, really into LOL dolls, which are the little collectory dolls things. It's a collecting thing, isn't it? Very expensive thing to collect as well. She chose well there. We indulged it, and now they're out the window. She's 10.
Yeah.
She don't need dolls. She still plays with them, but it's not as big an interest now. It's all about Roblox, playing online gaming. She loves it, and Minecraft too. And those two are typically neurodiverse pursuits as well for children of that age. So she's really into that, and she's got a few online friends that she knows in real life. There's a daughter of one of my friends who is also autistic, and they have yet to meet. Evie's very keen to meet them at some point, but we know this is a safe person because I know mum, and she'll chat a lot online, and because she does that, that's massively improved her writing skills. Her math skills have improved by playing Roblox because of calculating how much money in real life she needs to pay for things in Robux online. That's that's her thing at the moment. What's unique about her, I think, is she's incredibly creative, And it's not so much that she thinks outside the box. There is no box. There is no box. It's all, you know, she's got an incredible memory for quite unusual things. So she'll go, do you remember that time when? And she'll give you one obscure detail about something that happened maybe years ago. And I go, well, I don't remember that, but you do. It must be important to you, and we'll talk about it. But no, I don't remember half of these things, but she remembers it quite clearly. And she's been deeply, deeply affected by pandemic and lockdown, and has openly wept about just wanting it to be over, and she misses everyone and everything. Don't you remember when we used to go to here or there, and I miss that, and I just want to go there, and it's not fair. And she feels things very, very deeply. She's a very emotional person, and it's hard to be that way, but it's lovely that she is that way. I know she's just an amazing kid, and I just love to pieces, because I would do, wouldn't I? I'm a mum. I'm supposed to. I think I'm supposed to do that. But yeah, she is one of a kind and unforgettable. And I've heard as much from her teachers, certainly. And her TA, who is absolutely, she adores her. She goes absolutely above and beyond for her. And she's just one I'm never going to forget. I thought, no, well, that's a good thing. It's a good thing to be unforgettable, I think.
That's amazing. And yeah, she does sound like an absolutely amazing child. Thank you very much for sharing that, Ruth. Ruth, with your experience, with the vast knowledge of autism that you've acquired, with the children you've worked with, being Evie's mum, and everything you know about yourself and much, much more, what did you set out to do, and how have you actually been raising awareness? I know you've reached out to us following one of our previous interviews, Shelley's post on a group on Facebook, and I really do appreciate you having reached out to us, because that led to us having this amazing interview right now. But what have you been, because I haven't been looking much of your social media interactions and some of the other things you've been doing, have you been getting out there and raising awareness? And
for the first time this year. So I am an admin at a group called The Sanctuary, which is a safe space for autistic mothers. And that's actually closed at the moment. We open that group periodically, and then we sort of keep the membership to a certain level, just because you'll find with much larger groups it can get quite fraught in there, and the safe space is the important part for us. So we keep it to a size that we can moderate, and eventually, you know, people leave or move on, and then we open the doors again. So that's a space for autistic mums, and many of those have autistic children. Although when I say mum, this also applies to autistic members who don't identify necessarily as female. So they may have been assigned female at birth, but maybe non-binary or even male presenting. We've got quite a large number compared to the average population. There are more LGBTQ plus autistics or neurodiverse people. It's more highly represented in the autistic community than in the non-autistic community, is what I'm trying to say. So we are aware that a lot of our members aren't necessarily identifying as female. The only sort of bar to coming in is if you're not a parent of any kind, or you're assigned male at birth and are still presenting as male. So no dads, basically, in that respect. And that group, I've been admin there since its inception, pretty much. And there was another group prior to that. So I've been involved in the autistic community online for a couple of years, and came out as autistic on my timeline this month, because it's autistic. I'd like to say Autistic Acceptance Month, because it's one thing to be aware, but we want people to accept us. And so I've been putting out a post each day on my timeline, just with a fact, a statement, very short one, and then explaining further with a few comments further down, which is really just open to my friends. And that's been interesting because there are some people that I'm friends with online that have been really receptive to it, and I've asked questions, and I've been able to educate a little. And there are others that have not taken what I've said so well, and it's been really surprising actually that certain people have not been so nice or have pushed an agenda, as it were. It's been exhausting actually to do that. I don't see myself as an autistic activist, as it were, an advocate maybe, but is it something that I want to do as a career? I think it would take too much from me. It's really, really exhausting to effectively defend who you are and your way of life and your way of being to people who want to challenge that. And it's like, well, don't challenge it. This is just my lived experience, and it's not a debate. But some people seem to think it is. So I've done that. Will I do it again? Maybe this is a one-off. I don't know. Do I have the time? Do I have the energy? It's a big question. I think when you look at activists in the BLM movement and the struggle and the lashback from the non-white community, sort of saying, oh, but all lives matter. And you think, how many times has an individual had to explain that the way Black Lives Matter works when they're being assaulted with, but all lives matter? And there's a similar thing within the autistic community, and I think with any marginalized group, when you're saying, well, we don't want to use a puzzle piece, we prefer this symbol, or we would prefer identity first, language not person first, and you get challenged by that on that. Well, no, because you're not, you're autism, you should say that you're a person first. It's like, well, are you autistic? Then just listen to what we're saying, and you shouldn't have to keep defending why you prefer this language or any aspect of being autistic. You shouldn't have to keep defending it, but often that kind of work feels like a constant defensiveness, and it takes a lot from you. So I have a lot of admiration for those who can do it for any length of time. I'm not one of them. So that's as much as I will be doing, I think, basically to the end of the month. And then I need a break.
Amazing, absolutely amazing, Ruth. And I do have a question. I do apologize if I'm prying because I don't know how much about it you can speak, but your upcoming book, the quotes I see there, is that related to autism or?
Well, the main character is autistic, but she doesn't declare that. But otherwise, it's got nothing to do with that. It's 3 years so far, and I still haven't finished the thing because I do have issues with finishing projects I start. That's an autism thing. It's a comic, fantasy, detective, paranormal novel, as it were. It's like 4 genres, but it's called Web Paranormal Investigations, and it's a story I've been working on. I first came up with the idea about 20 years ago, so it's been a long time coming. And the main character is 40, and she inherits an investigation agency, which she also inherits her dead uncle. His ghost is still around to be her mentor. So it's not a serious book in any way, shape or form. But yeah, it is something I do and want to get finished and get out there, so I can go, I've done that now. On to the next thing. Always on to the next thing. Yeah.
I'm looking forward to when it comes out, and I'll be keeping an eye out for it. Yeah.
And another 5 years.
Yeah. And could I ask, is it going to be under your name, or do you write under pen? Am I even allowed to ask that? Or
My name, Ruth Sharman.
Ruth
It's mine. I want everyone to know that I wrote it.
Excellent.
Yeah,
Excellent.
it is. people go with pen names. I can understand why they do. Oops, dropping a phone. I can understand why they do.
Yeah.
But no, it's like giving birth. So all that effort, I need the recognition. I shall have it.
That's wonderful. I'm certainly looking forward to when it comes out. And you touched on sensory profiles earlier. Do you, and I know you touched on how Evie responds when having her hair brushed and combed. Could you tell us more a bit about your sensory?
She screams like a banshee.
Oh, I see. Okay, so I'm not too good at lip reading. Yeah. So could you tell us a little bit about some of the sensory sensitivity issues that you face, and Evie too? I know last week we spoke about a trip to Wales, and you touched on that. Maybe that's related to it. And feel free to tell us about whatever you like.
Yeah. So I became, because obviously as I was looking into, am I autistic? I had noticed, and it does seem to be this way, that particularly women, but I mean, this is anecdotal, so, that as we sort of hit our 40s, our sensory profiles tend to become more sensitive. And also it, again, coincided with the fact that I'm thinking, I think I'm autistic. And I have quite a strong sensory profile. This means that I'm quite sensitive to if things are too bright, if things are too dark, if things are too noisy, or if things are too quiet. I tend to be sensory avoidant, so I don't. Some people are sensory seeking, so they seek out like deep pressure, like big, deep, strong hugs and things like that, or wrapping themselves up in a weighted blanket. I feel like I'm being suffocated if that's the case, so no, thank you. And Evie is very similar. She likes to have lots and lots of things around her, and she likes soft toys and the sort of the touch of fur and soft materials, and she really likes that. I mean, I used to like that. She's very, very sensitive to clothing, so a label in her clothes that could really just ruin her day. So I have to cut those out, or she'll go through phases, for instance, of liking certain clothes, and then I can't wear those anymore. No more leggings for me. I just can't do it. And so I have to find an alternative clothing for her at short notice, which is sometimes a challenge. And I think, I still have issues with that now today myself, but I'm an adult, so I can decide, I don't want to wear this, and just get changed, and no fuss. No one needs to know about it. But with Evie, she's a lot more vocal. If I'm in a situation, it's like this interview, I will probably be no good for anything for an hour or so after this, because I will have been peopled out.
Wow.
I've given my energy, and that's fine, because I know that, and I can make accommodations for that.
And thank you so much on that note, by the way, for giving your energy to this interview.
It's no sacrifice. It's fine. It's good. But in the jobs that I was in, I ended up in a part-time role where I was a receptionist at a doctor's surgery, and I couldn't have worked a full day there. I only worked like part days, but after a particularly difficult day, because you're trying to help people, and I love that aspect of the job and the problem solving, but sometimes, you've got someone standing at this screaming at you because they can't get an appointment, and you deal with it, and it all works out in the end. But the emotional sort of fallout from that, I find a lot harder to let go than maybe the average person, and you carry it with you, and it makes you feel physically sick sometimes. I have physical symptoms from being overwhelmed, like migraine, and that seems to have developed recently. I now get aura, so I get all these flashing lights as well, which is just delightful. It's not delightful. And I don't have, for instance, I've said about the DCD, I've got a lack of balance. I knock into things more often, so I'm a little bit more clumsy at certain times of the month. Particularly, I've noticed as well, women will find that around their cycle, there's certain points where we're even more sensitive, and we say, oh yeah, it's your time of the month because you're shouting at me. But it's more a case of things seem louder or smells seem stronger, or because you could go into a room and someone's wearing really strong perfume, and quite frankly, that's it. I've got a headache and I feel sick and I can't focus because of this one person's perfume. It's really, it's frustrating and it's irritating and it's annoying that you can't just get on with things. So sometimes the sensory profile can be quite annoying. And what can you do about it? A lot of it's avoidance and coping mechanisms. So if it's particularly noisy or particularly busy, then, you know, okay, so on my commute, I used to put earbuds in, listen to particular music, or, you know, to switch off. I would actually be writing my novel on the train. So I could sort of switch off from where I was and be in control of a little world that I was in, which was the world of this book. And just be careful not to miss your stop, which I had done before. And in the end, I mean, I left the job that required me to commute because I realised just how physically it was taking so much from me and I couldn't do it anymore. And there are a lot of autistics that don't do that kind of work, can't work full time because the amount of energy it takes up, and that we need a lot of downtime, or I need a lot of downtime. Can't speak necessarily for everyone else. And Evie needs a lot of downtime. So, you know, she can get very overstimulated by being out and about. And she does this thing when we're out and about where she just starts narrating everything that we see. Oh, look, there's a dog. I wonder if that dog is called, and that dog's got, oh, I would like a dog like that. And one day when I'm an adult, I'd like a dog that's a Pomeranian because I think they're the cutest dogs. And oh, look, and you see that house over there, and it just goes on the whole journey, because that's how she deals with things. That's how she processes. That's how she navigates her world, and that's exhausting. But it's her, so we just get on with it. She's enjoying herself, she's happy. The other side of it for her, she has sensory processing disorder, as I believe I do to an extent. So you hear what's being said, but you're often accused of not listening because you might hear the words, but then it's not been processed as quickly as maybe it is for someone else. So they say, oh, do you want to finish your washing up? And I might have heard it. And are you telling me to finish your washing up? I don't want to. You do it or whatever. But it might take you a while. Or you might only hear some of the words. So if I say, Evie, can you not do that? Or can you not walk around without your slippers on? And she'll hear only she'll hear you can walk around with your slippers on. She's not heard the not. So she'll sometimes do the opposite of what has been said. At school, they have to break down tasks into very small chunks for her because she'll only remember the first bit or the last bit because she's still processing it. And sometimes I'll say something like, oh, it's dinner time. And she'll go, what? And I go, and I already heard you because she's then processed it in the middle of it. Which again, you just have to get used to. You think, oh, how belligerent my child is. But you just have to get used to it because it's just the way she works.
Yeah.
And we both lip read, which I discovered recently because of Buster Keaton, my special interest. I am currently going through a lot of his work and making subtitles of what was said. So what the actors in the days making silent movies, what they said on screen is not the same as the words they put up. Sometimes because what they said was rude, which is that's a good motivator to find out what were they saying. I'm quite good at it. So because of it, a lifetime of unconsciously lip reading. And the other thing my daughter does, she was watching Shrek the other day and she said, can you set up the subtitles for me? I said, oh, all right then, why do you want the subtitles? And she said, well, because sometimes, because she knows the film inside out, she said, they say things, I don't know what they're saying. So she's now using subtitles to support her, and a lot of autistics do. So she understands it infinitely better now because she's got the exact words there in front of her. If she's not sure, she can go back, and that was a really nice bit of self-awareness from her, on her part as well, and we're seeing a lot more of that. So yeah, sensory profile, not being able to feel the cold properly. It's a hot day and she's got a great big jumper on and warm boots, and you're like, Evie, you're gonna overheat, love. Well, I'm cold. She goes out there 10 minutes later, I'm too hot. Because she doesn't necessarily recognise body temperature very well. She's walking around the house in t-shirt and shorts at the minute, and it's not warm for t-shirt and shorts. It really isn't, but that's what she feels comfortable in. So yeah, I'd like to say there are benefits to having a sense, being so sensory sensitive. There probably are, because sometimes we'll hear things and notice things other people don't, which helps with our sort of pattern making skills, as it were. And I think you get a lot of artists and creatives who are sensory sensitivity. But as a rule, I think there's probably a lot more deficits and a lot of things you have to do to navigate them. Would I switch off my sensory sensitivity? Maybe sometimes I would. Would I stop being autistic? No, because I wouldn't be me anymore. But yeah, it's a pain, really. It can be.
That's absolutely fascinating. I was completely enthralled listening to everything you're sharing.
I don't even listen to what I'm saying, Shaheen. I'm just saying stuff.
No, well, thank you so much.
It's from here anyway, so yeah.
And I'm sure everyone who is going to watch this interview and who'll be able to will really resonate with what's been said right now. So thanks again for that, Ruth. Us as a company, Ai4Autism, we're currently raising awareness to build a tool that we hope to help autistic people with sensory sensitivity issues, and namely identifying reasons behind certain triggers that results in certain meltdown. And so we're still in the early stage of it, but would you say if something was developed back in the day, whenever it was, would something like this have helped you? Would something like this have helped Evie or maybe the wider autistic community?
Yes. In short, yes. Because it's been a long journey discovering what her triggers are, what my triggers are, and being self-aware. To have a tool that would almost act as a shortcut or as to validate, to confirm what you're thinking, well, maybe it would cut out an awful lot of hardship and heartache. Because I know from when I worked with autistic children, and there were sort of behaviours that we'd see in a child. There was something that we used to do called an ABC chart, which is antecedent, what happened before, behaviour, so what we're looking at, and consequence, so what you did afterwards. And it's a good way of building up patterns of why a child is behaving a certain way, because behavior is communication. So you go, oh, that child's so naughty, they always do this, when they're always poking that other child. Why are they doing that? Well, maybe it turns out because that other child is doing something to provoke that reaction, therefore the child is poking to say, no, don't do that to me anymore. So putting it in a very simple way. So the behavior is sort of like a meltdown, or feeling uncomfortable. So the antecedent is going to be the trigger, and you may not always know what the trigger is. So by writing down what happened before this child did the poking bit, you might suddenly notice what has caused it. And then the consequences, what you did afterwards, may have actually made things worse, or it may have made things better. So this device will be basically recognizing this is when the behavior happens, this is when you're melting down. prior to that, look at, well, what happened just before? Is it where you are? Is it what you're doing? Is it who's around you? And then the consequences can sort of say, well, this is how we avoid that in future. And this is what you can do to limit or to circumnavigate that meltdown happening, as it were. So yes, it would be very useful, I think, because I still have meltdowns, even as an adult, and they're not pleasant. They're thankfully not very often, and usually afterwards I go, well, that was because I did this, and I could have avoided it, but I didn't. And sometimes it's something that's completely unavoidable, and you just have to go, oh well, and be kind to yourself afterwards, and to maybe apologise to certain people around you as well. But usually they're the ones sort of saying to you, no, it's okay, don't worry, I should have this, I should have that. So yeah, no one wants to be in a meltdown. They're not fun, they're not enjoyable, and no one wants to feel uncomfortable. So something that would support you feeling that less often would be good. Yes.
That's some valuable feedback for us, and thank you very much for that, Ruth. We're kind of approaching the end of the interview, but I do have a few more questions, and it's with regards to, one of them is with regards to the use of language when it comes to speaking about the autistic community and autistic people. In an earlier phone call we had last week, we talked about the use of language, and in the early stages of Ai4Autism, when we were putting out content, or when I was reaching out to people, I would say, yeah, we're looking to build a tool to support people with autism rather than autistic people. And earlier you mentioned about sentence structure. I guess my question is, what would you like to share your thoughts on this, and may hopefully fill the gaps in my knowledge, and maybe knowledge of people out there who like to have a better understanding, but they don't know how to approach or how to navigate through the ever-evolving use of language we have in our society?
I think this is the thing. Words are important, and funnily enough, this month, I was challenged on my use of language. But some people think this: why are words so important? Because we're frightened to make a mistake, because we get shouted at if we use the wrong words. And it's like, well, there are words that the disabled community do not use anymore. And I'm not going to use well, I don't know if it's appropriate to say a particular word.
Feel free, if it's an example in the context of what we're talking about.
For example, in the context, would you call a disabled person retarded? No, we would not use that word. It is ableist. It is wrong. It is not a word that we use. Everybody knows that. But 10 years ago, 20 years ago, people were still using it. We don't use it now. We've learned. We're better. We've improved. We've listened. We've understood. So when someone from the autistic community says, I prefer to describe myself as being autistic, I don't have autism, it is not an accessory, it is an intrinsic part of who I am. I want to be known as an autistic person. Deaf people do not describe themselves with people with deafness. They are deaf. That's an intrinsic part of their personality, who they are as a person, and they embrace that. And you know, I embrace my autism. There have been many polls held by all sorts of organisations that have asked this question, and the overwhelming majority in these polls held with autistic people tend to be identity first language, not person first. So that's what we go with. And it's sometimes it can be difficult, because if someone is using that language, my default is, well, they don't intend to use the wrong language, so I gently correct. But no one likes to be corrected, because no one wants to get things wrong, do they? So sometimes, depending on how you do that, you can get screamed at. I mean, not screamed at, it's online or whatever, but you can get a less than positive reaction. So it's really, I try very hard to be sensitive when correcting. Well, actually, sometimes the word actually is enough to get someone set off. But I might mirror back and say, oh, these poor people with autism, it must be so difficult for them. As an autistic person, I find that sometimes things are difficult, but also there are lots of positives. So you're mirroring back. So you're saying, as an autistic person rather than a person with autism. So you just use the correct language back. And that may not necessarily stick, but it's one way of doing it. And the other thing is, you know, individuals may prefer to use person first, and we have to kind of respect that if they are autistic. But I do find that a little bit challenging when they prefer the person first, because I do think it's still, you know, it's almost like internalized ableism. But at the end of the day, individuals refer to themselves as who they are. And if they're hurting no one, what's the problem with that? On the spectrum is a phrase that is sort of going out of favour, because it's almost a way of avoiding saying autism. Like, autism is a dirty word. It's like, oh, they're on the spectrum, you know, talking about that person. Whereas other people say, oh yeah, I'm on the spectrum, as if there's a lot of misunderstanding about what the spectrum means, as if it's a linear line. So it's not, it's a whole sort of array of colors, types, unique individuals that are at different points in a sort of a 3D map of a spectrum, as it were. And you meet one autistic person, you've met one autistic person, because we're all individuals, the same as everyone else. And other communities, which just sort of muddies the waters a little bit. So for instance, the Down syndrome community tend to use person first language. Now, I've worked with a lot of people who have Down syndrome, but my gut feeling is to say Down syndrome people, because of being an autistic person. But a lot of people may be offended by that. And I think it's because many of the advocates in that community are actually parents, carers, allies of people who have been diagnosed as having Down syndrome. And also there are medical aspects to that condition, whereas we have comorbidities that are not exactly, they're not autistic. So DCD, for instance, is not associated only with autism. There are people who have DCD that are not autistic, but whereas with Downs it's an intrinsic part. So it's because each community within the disabled community have a different viewpoint. If you're outside of that, I can imagine it can be confusing, and people don't want to upset other people, and people don't want to get things wrong. So it's up to people to educate themselves. It's up to people to listen to those who have that lived experience. We can do our best within the limitations that we have and the energy that we have to gently correct and to put the right information out there. But there are times, if someone has said the same incorrect thing to you over and over and over again, and you are exhausted and you've been trying your hardest, that you may be shorter with that person than you'd like to be. And as soon as you are, oh, well, no wonder, you know, autistic people are just so rude though, aren't they? So why should we listen to what they need? Because they're just rude to us and they don't want to help themselves. And so it's really, really challenging to be in that arena. But language is important, and I will just keep mirroring back the correct language, and eventually it will catch on, because there are plenty of words that we don't use anymore that we know are not words to use, that we don't use. So it will happen. It will shift on, and probably it will change again. But you know, people might say, well, you know, they're just words. Words don't hurt. Well, I think words, I can remember some of the things that people have said to me from years back that still hurt me deeply. So, and they were just words. Words are the way in which we reach other people. So yeah, getting it right it shows that you care, and it shows empathy. And I would urge anyone, if you've got questions, ask. If you get short shrift back, maybe it's the way you ask that question. Maybe that person just hasn't got the energy to do it. But in a space where someone has said, I'm putting myself forward, ask me anything, use that opportunity to learn.
That's fascinating. Thanks for that, Ruth. In fact, I would say this is the first time, and I've learned something new from what you just said right now, that the sentence on the spectrum is now falling out of fashion. In my mind, I used to think
An insult a lot.
Yeah.
It's been used as an insult, and it's not. I mean, it's not wrong to use it. It's not wrong to use it at all, but it's just one I wouldn't use, and plenty of people I know that wouldn't use it.
Yeah.
So if you said, oh, you shouldn't get blasted for using it, but it's just something we're moving away from. There's nothing wrong with saying they're autistic.
Yeah. And it's fascinating because in my mind, when I was processing on the spectrum, I envisioned it as something describing the vast diversity within the autistic community. But the way you described it is even better. It's like a three-dimensional map with different elements and different spaces in different times. Yeah, and thank you very much for highlighting that. I think that's based on what you said. That's something I'm going to stop using, simply because for the reasons you've stated. And I think there are better ways to address someone who's autistic. They're simply saying autistic. We're approaching the end of the interview, and Ruth, I want to thank you so much for this. Is there a message, one message you would like to send out to our audience about what it's like to have a child on this, who's autistic, or the audience, anything about autism? Is there a message you'd like to put out there?
It's a difficult one, isn't it? Because people go, what's it like being autistic? So, well, what's it like being not autistic? It's just I'm me, and this is me, and that's it. Obviously, it's a bit more complex than that. I think so. The puzzle piece is used, and we don't like it, and there's a reason that the autistic community don't like it. It's associated with Autism Speaks, which is an organisation which does not speak for autistics. They are looking to cure autism. And I think that autistics have an important part to play in society. We are the way we are for a reason. I'm getting emotional. Oh no. We're not a puzzle to be solved. That's why I like the infinity, the rainbow infinity, because it reflects the infinite ways in which someone can be autistic, but it also reflects, the infinite ways in which we see and process and navigate the world. And that, I mean, that's really it. We're not a problem, we're a solution. And every person that exists has got something to give, and a reason and a purpose, however big or small in the grand scheme of things it is. So when you have an organisation like that that seeks to rid the world of the likes of myself, my daughter, and all those other autistics out there, makes me feel quite sick, to be honest. We have every right to be here, and we'll be here. So there. That's a very messy way of putting it. I would have loved to have said it more succinctly, but I'm not really capable of that.
That's fascinating. In fact, in my mind, the way it's processed is like there's nothing to fix. And when we started off, exactly.
Yeah.
Because when we started off Ai4Autism, we were developing a tool so that we can have a better understanding, not that there's anything to cure, not that there's anything to fix, in fact, something so we can have a better understanding of ourselves, of our children, so that when they're experiencing something, we can provide better support or make those changes in their lives that can improve their overall livelihood. Ruth, I want to say thank you so much for this absolutely wonderful interview, I just have one final question. How can our audience find out more about you, the work you do, your wonderful creations, your book that's hopefully will come out in a half a decade or even sooner?
Yeah, it could be,
How can our audience
even longer.
even...
So, oh well, you mentioned I'll plug your jewelry. I do make jewelry, some of it of which is so I'm an actually autistic creator, and some of it is reflecting autistic pride and sort of disability jewelry. For those who are into spoon theory, stuff for spoonies, and that's on lovelyruthie.etsy.com. There's a lot of geeky stuff there. Majority of my audience tend to be autistics. I am online on the Sanctuary, which the doors could be closed, but you can always PM me at Ruth Sharman. I'm on Facebook. Yeah, I don't do advocacy work as it stands, really. So I'm just about on the internet doing things. So if you wanted to ask a question, do, but it's not my default and it's not what I'm about, as it were.
Amazing. Well, for everyone at home, what I will do is I will put the link to the Etsy and your name at the bottom of the description of the video when we put it up. For now, Ruth, thank you so much for your time today. I think it was an absolutely magnificent, insightful, touching, entertaining, and very thought-provoking interview. And for everyone at home, thank you all for listening and for your time too. If you liked what you saw today and you want to share your story, get in touch with us and let's put your voice out there in the world. And thank you, Ruth. Thank you, everyone. And bye for now.